The first item on the handout there is a short handout that you'll probably notice by that was shortest in the book, and this is very well done as well. I think the first item there is taken from the beginning of the Death of Concord, the book Leinster version, and it says that there once upon a time the men of Ulster were greatly intoxicated in Erin vodka. Now, that is an accurate translation by Bruno Meyer, but it might give the indication that they really weren't intoxicated all the time. In fact, they do seem to have been drinking a lot of the time. They seem to be greatly intoxicated in most of the tales, and as the tragics observed in their growth of literature, in the Ulster's life, we find feasting everywhere. And of course, the emphasis tends to be on drink. The tragics do say there are references to food as well as to drink, but the drinking is the main thing. Enormous quantities are provided. The setting may be at Concourse Court at Ardibaka, that's at Fort Portgar, but in several sagas the scene is laid in the house of some wealthy man where Concourse and his court are feasting. So the court here refers both to the officials gathered around Concourse at Edinburgh, but also that are on the move. The expenses of providing this hospitality seems to have been shared. Concourse would be obliged to ensure the hospitality, but he was clever enough when he was elected to make a law and left there. I don't know if that fits in with the what we know about the ancient laws, that he would be able to do that. Anyway, he made a rep which provided that the kingship, that each warrior would provide a feast for the Ulstermen for a night, and that the king do the same for 7 nights, or alternatively, it could have been 4 nights. There are frequent references to the sovereign feast at Everett, that would be our Halloween feast. And in the Lady Sickness of Cochullen, on the other hand, it is said that the sovereign feast was held in Mount Wicklow, which of course is far away from the It lasted, we're told, for 3 days before Sovereign and the 3 nights after it, and 3 days after it, and the day of Sovereign itself. And then it continues, and I quote, and nothing at all was done by the time, save games and gatherings and pleasure and delight and eating and feasting. Nevertheless, the fair had a very serious purpose, and here I quote from Dillon's translation of the passage. The purpose for which they used to hold it was to assign always to each man his triumph and his prowess at every sovereign. It was their custom, moreover, for the sake of the triumphs, to hold the fair in this way, that is, to bring in their wallets the tongue of every man they had killed. And they would bring the tongues of cattle so as to increase the triumphs there. And each would bring his trophies then openly, each of them doing it in his turn. For their swords, and the way they used to do it was with their swords on their thighs when they were making the triumph. For their swords used to hit against them, and if they declared a false triumph. And this was natural, for demons used to speak to them from their weapons, and thus their weapons were guarantees for them. Now, I quote this at great length, not only because it indicates what the storyteller wants us to believe happened at this, but also because it's an example of something of which we find quite a bit in the Ulster cycle, of what we might call ethnographic remarks about the customs that we are to take it prevailed in the time of King Concourse. Wherever this feast was held, whether it was at Edinburgh or elsewhere, it was Concourse who dictated the seating arrangement and the general conduct of the feast. And again, I quote some length, this time from Watson's translation of the intoxication of the Ulstermen. After that, his drinking house was arranged by Concourse according to exploits and divisions and kinships, according to grades and arts and gentle manners, with a view to the well disposing of the banquet. There were proportioners to apportion, and cupbearers to dispense, and doorkeepers to keep the doors. Their melodies and their minstrelsies and songs of mirth were sung. Their lays and their tales and their eulogies were chanted for them. Jewels and riches and treasures were distributed to them. So we have in that passage actually a number of officials being named who were part of the court and who evidently travelled with Conchobar when he and the nobleman Ulster went to enjoy a feast. Now the feasts, as Phil O'Leary has documented, were frequently occasions for contention among the warriors, as in the competition mentioned in the passage already quoted from the Wasting Sickness of Cuchulainn. And also you get the contest for the Corral Beer, which everybody who knows the Ulster cycle will know is the best portion, the champion's portion. It's number 4 in the handout. And this was contested by the warriors, sometimes within the group of Ulster warriors, as in the Feast of Victory, where it's 3 Ulster warriors who are rivals for the Corral Beer, Cuchulainn, Clonakilty, and Iver and Bulla, but it could also be contested by warriors from Ulster with their eternal enemies, the Connacht, as happens, of course, in the story of Montefiore King. In the Táin, rather interestingly at one point, Cuchulainn's charioteer goads Cuchulainn by telling him that he would have shown more effort if he were, and I quote, competing for the Corral Beer at Evan. Now, the heavy drinking at the feast could lead to general unruliness, and often did apparently, but also to the making of calamitous decisions. The feast described in the Deirdre story, the exile of the sons of Issue, is a case in point. This feast is hosted by Conchobar's Sciallaigh, that's number 5 on the handout, the storyteller, and the boisterous and drunken Ulstermen are plied with drink served by Fedrin, his pregnant wife, the storyteller's pregnant wife. And Fedrin, his child then, which is Deirdre of course, cries out from her womb. And it is prophesied that evil deeds will be done in Ulster because of that child, and the Ulstermen declare that she should be put to death instantly. But Conchobar disagrees, and he declares that she should be saved and assigned to him. He would bring her up and then have her as his wife. Now, the Ulstermen, we are told, did not dare to argue with that, but clearly they wouldn't have regarded it as being very wise, and this fateful and entirely inappropriate decision was acted upon. If we were to regard these stories as being exemplary in intention, I'm sure we could see that this is an argument not for abstention, at least for temperance in drinking. But it does seem to be significant here that this feast was given by Conchobar's Sciallaigh, or storyteller. Now, I haven't actually completed my sort of investigation of the Ulster cycle for the purpose of this project, but so far anyway, I haven't discovered any other text in which the Sciallaigh is mentioned as part of the court. But remember, it is Fedrin's wife who gives birth to Deirdre, and what is born on that night is not only a baby girl, but also a story. And Cospas, the Druid, who prophesies the evil deed that would occur in the time of the newborn, ends his prophecy, the second prophecy actually, with the words which are quoted on page 6. First of all, in translation, your little grave will be everywhere, it will be a famous tale, O Deirdre. Now that is Hull's translation. Hull does not take it that your little grave will be everywhere means that the fame of it, the story of it will be everywhere, which I think is probably what it means, and certainly the last line of that prophecy, it will be a famous tale of Deirdre, and as I say, shows that in the house of the storyteller that night, a great tale was indeed born. Now, the Ulster cycle, as Barbara Hillers has observed, depicts a circle of heroes which should be compared with other such circles, and I quote, gathered around the figure of a king to defend his honour and to drink his wine, ever ready for adventures of a military, chivalric, or amorous kind. And Thomas Clancy has said that Conchobar, not Cuchulainn, is, and I quote, the central character of the Ulster cycle, the king at whose court many of the events take place, and whose staff of warriors, druids, physicians, and satirists populate them. The creation of a fully populated court of officials with defined and fairly consistent literary characteristics is one of the triumphs of the cycle as a whole. And it seemed to me from incidental things that are remarked upon from time to time in the course of the tales that it would be worthwhile to make a thorough investigation of the cycle from that point of view. In other words, what information do we get there about how they conduct themselves and who they are and so on and so forth. But this is very much a preliminary indication of that, and in fact all I want to do here is to say a little bit about two questions, one of which is how was the conqueror elected, and secondly, how does he conduct himself as a king. And I'm legitimating my presence in this particular session by referring twice to Peter Cowell The information is scattered, of course, through a number of tales, and we cannot hope to get an entirely consistent picture. We have, for example, two accounts of Conchobar's accession to the kingship. In the account of the intoxication of Ulster, the province is first divided into three parts, which were given respectively to Conchobar, Cuchulainn, and another guy called Fintan. A year after the division was made, Conchobar prepared the feast of Samhain at Edwin and sent invitations to Cuchulainn and Fintan, so he was sort of preempted the matter there. Now, arriving separately at Edwin, each of them is asked to siege his third, each of the two, Cuchulainn and Fintan, are asked to siege their third province to Conchobar for a year. And they agree to do this, but Cuchulainn does it conditionally. He says, if the province were the better of his for having it for a year, it is not impractical that he should have it, and if it is not better, we deem it but a little boy's skirmish to place him on his own third at the end of the year. And then, having made the commitment for that year, Cuchulainn and Fintan enjoy Conchobar's feast for 3 days and 3 nights, and return to their homes. Now, a year later, we're told the province is, and I quote, a flooding wellspring of right under Conchobar. So in other words, all is well, and so he is accepted as the king.